Good afternoon, everybody. Mic check, we're all good? Good. Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming on such short notice. This morning, at the request of President Joe Biden, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, we know it as OSHA, issued an emergency temporary standard demanding that private companies with 100 or more employees mandate the COVID-19 vaccine for their workers. This will also apply to state and local government here in Indiana. Employers who don't adhere to the requirements could face penalties of up to $14,000 per violation, and tens of millions of Americans could lose their jobs if they don't comply with this excessive government overreach. This announcement by the Biden administration is particularly egregious to have during a time when our country is already dealing with not only a supply chain crisis, but we're dealing with inflation, we're dealing with an economic crisis, we're dealing with an immigration crisis, and we're also dealing with a lack of employment opportunities. This edict is unlikely to win the hearts and minds of Hoosiers or any Americans who don't want to be vaccinated. It will only drive further skepticism, and many Americans will simply leave the job market instead of complying. As I drive around the state of Indiana, I'm getting told this every single day, if not every couple of hours. When the president first announced this mandate on September 9th, I met with many of you, and I said at that time that I would do everything in my power as Indiana's Attorney General to protect our guaranteed liberty and our economy at the same time. Today I stand before you to tell you that I'm making good on that promise. From that day, my team and I have worked diligently on our legal strategy, preparing for this time, and we've worked extensively on our legal briefings to make sure that we were ready. So, Indiana will be challenging each of the 3 vaccine mandates in separate lawsuits. Most of these provisions kick in 30 days after tomorrow, but it is not yet clear how these violations will be enforced. Regardless, we plan on filing a lawsuit challenging the contractor mandate this afternoon. We will be filing a separate lawsuit against OSHA's mandate tomorrow once their rules are published, and we plan on filing a third lawsuit against the Medicaid mandate next week. We will, in doing this, also be joining other states, depending on the lawsuit, most likely at this time Louisiana and Mississippi, and we'll be joining those states in specifically challenging the contractor mandate and also the Medicaid mandate, and that'll be that separate third suit. A little bit more detail on these lawsuits. Regarding the OSHA emergency temporary standard, we're going to file our own lawsuit as the state of Indiana in the 7th Circuit. The OSHA statute has long detailed a process for us, our complainants, to go right to the appellate court. In our case, that'll be the 7th Circuit in Chicago. We'll be doing this lawsuit on our own. There'll be other lawsuits that are filed by other states on their own in their respective circuits. There will be groups of states that come together and file as a group in different circuits. Indiana is going to do a standalone suit called a petition for review in the 7th Circuit. At that time, we're also going to be filing a complementary document called asking the court to stay the OSHA rule, to stop its enforcement. In that, we're pleased to have the cooperation of the Department of Labor, as well as expert witnesses who will file declarations in that stay to help the court make its decision. The second lawsuit is that federal contractor lawsuit that I discussed. So That's basically any person or entity that works for the federal government that is not a direct employee of the federal government. Frankly, it's still unclear as to exactly what a federal contractor includes, but it could be not only private businesses here in the state of Indiana, but it could be other state agencies. It could be our universities. We know that the Department of Defense, the NIH, has several contracts here in the state of Indiana, and we are still collecting that evidence. But we have enough evidence as of today, like I said, to join Louisiana and Mississippi in joining together to file suit against the federal contractor mandate. Now that mandate's based on an executive order that the president sent to the federal agencies to start asking the contractors who they have contracts with to change their contract to require their employees to have a vaccine mandate. The third lawsuit again. That's the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They have an interim rule. It should be being published in the Federal Registry tomorrow. And that basically covers healthcare workers who deliver healthcare services where those services are covered by Medicaid and or Medicare. There, a vaccine would now be required. So we are looking for that rule, and we plan on engaging perhaps again with Louisiana and Mississippi to file a suit there. It's important, obviously, to know, and when you're filing these lawsuits, to know exactly what the rule is and what it says, so we're waiting for its publication. I'm joined by my Chief of Staff and Chief Deputy Attorney General, Lori Torres, and also the Chief of our litigation section, Patricia Erdman. These are two veterans, not only of Indiana law, but of state government, and I'm pleased that they're helping me lead this effort, along with our Solicitor General and his team, Thomas Fisher. So with that, we're happy to take a few questions.
Can you explain why the employee mandate applies to Indiana? I know not every state has the requirement that state and local officials have to be vaccinated, but under Indiana's requirements.
So you're talking about public employees now that work for state and local government. Well, that's because way back when OSHA was first implemented, federal OSHA, the states had a choice. You could either develop a state plan that in no cases was less stringent than the federal OSHA plan, or you didn't have to. And I bet my chief deputy could give us more detail there, because she's, in her career, has worked extensively with the plan that Indiana does have. Since Indiana does have a plan, the public employees are also implicated.
Is there any concern that COVID virus could just spread once again without a mandate? Is that something that you guys have think about? I mean, after the last year that we had?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I thank you for it. But here's the thing: it's been with us for years now. Quite literally. So, the fact of the matter, what makes Joe Biden and the federal government's play here so egregious and really so insidious is that this is not a workplace issue. It's been with us. It's been with us at our homes. It's been with us on our sports teams. It's been with us in our kids' schools. It's been with us everywhere. And so it's, again, egregious and insidious that you use a body of law that was meant to protect workers at the workplace from dangerous toxicities, from other directly unsafe situations, to use it in this fashion to cover something that is a much bigger part of our lives. And that's how we're going to win this case, by the way.
To be clear, even with these lawsuits, local hospitals, they can still make their own mandate, correct? That's still, local businesses can still make their own mandate if they want to.
That is correct. The other thing that's a problem, though, is that the General Assembly just last session passed what they call a vaccine passport prohibition. This mandate, this OSHA mandate, would nullify Indiana state law in that regard, and I think that's also a problem. This is a direct attack on states' rights. This is a direct attack on individual liberties and freedom, and it's a complete overreach of the federal government. Take, for example, the CMS interim rule that I talked about, that third lawsuit, where that's going to be, the rule for which is going to be published tomorrow. I mean, there you have a situation where the state of Indiana and all the states are particularly called to administer the Medicaid program. This is going to affect thousands, maybe millions of Medicaid workers and change the very way, right down to the root of how Indiana administers its Medicaid program. So you're talking about drastic and big change here. And then not to mention these employees that are just simply going to retire and not come back. I mean, we're seeing that, right, over the last few months for these private employers and others who have mandated it themselves, you know, per entity basis. And again, with this, with the economic crisis we're in, with the worker shortage we have, this is going to, the supply chain problems we're having, this is really going to exacerbate the problem. So we're, and other states' attorneys general are stepping into the breach here to try to get this law, this mandate stayed, so that we can really preserve our economy.
This might differ a little bit depending on which of the three lawsuits. So I was focusing on the OSHA and on the file of the Seventh Circuit. What's the legal argument here?
For the, I'm sorry, for the OSHA one, you're just garbled. I couldn't.
Focusing on the OSHA one.
What's the legal argument?
Yeah.
Well, along the lines of the things we said. I mean, that we've been talking about, that it's an overreach. It's an overreach for OSHA. This isn't necessarily a workplace, excuse me, this isn't nearly a workplace violation. This is a misuse of our OSHA laws, right? So, yeah, so that's one point. We're at the preliminary stages too, so a lot of the initial arguments are going to be procedural, but we're going to try to stay the mandate initially because of the irreparable harm that could occur if the mandate was to allow it to be enforced. And then if we can get that stay, we'll have time to fight on the merits of whether or not it's good. So a lot of the front loading of this will be procedural.
So again,
And I don't know if one of the my two executives here would like to comment further on your question. I don't know if there's anything to add or not.
I think there's one thing to add. So we can talk about feasibility too. I don't know how many of you have waited 5 days to get a test, get someplace to get a test. There are millions of Americans that, if they choose not to get vaccinated, will have to get tested. So a weekly test times the millions who may not get vaccinated. We're not even sure whether that's feasible in the United States now across the country, of whether you can actually get those tests at the employee's expense, by the way, and on the employee's own time. So feasibility is one of the things that we're going to raise in our complaint.
the public employee requirement under that you talked about, does that also apply to school districts in Indiana? Certain public employees?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it most likely would. I don't recall. It's a 490-page rule that they've come out with. So we've broken it up into different parts and are reviewing it. But I believe it would. It would. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry if you could clarify why you're going it alone on the OSHA law.
Yeah.
As opposed to other states.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense given the body of law the Seventh Circuit has produced over years and decades on similar subjects for us to go right to the Seventh Circuit there on this one. And then, you know, with the other lawsuits, you got to understand these are David and Goliath battles. The federal government, as you probably understand, is very, very big, and the states are under attack these days on a lot of different issues. So when you have these David and Goliath battles, it's nice to have a lot of Davids And so you join with states where it makes sense, where you can share resources. I happen to know, he's a personal friend of mine, the Attorney General of Louisiana. Our stabs work on several different issues together, and we were coming to the same legal conclusions, so it made sense to help share the work. And same with Mississippi.
Do you anticipate many other states joining those two?
Well, I think you're going to see many states join lawsuits or file their own on all three of these issues. How they group together, I think, is just dependent on, again, relationship, geography, the different bodies of law, the jurisprudence of the different circuits, and how it bakes up depending on their issue.
You got time for one more.
While you're pursuing the stay.
Anybody with a first one before we go to second rounds? Not that I don't love your questions. Okay.
While you're pursuing the stay at the Seventh Circuit on the OSHA rule, are you, your office, the governor's office, state DOL, directing the state office of the state OSHA to not comply with the temporary standard?
You know, that's the governor's agency, so certainly it's ultimately his call. We're going to court, and we're gonna fight this thing, and I'll leave it to him to decide how he wants to handle that from a policy decision. There may have been some staff conversations along those lines, so if Lori wants to chime in on that, we can, or we just leave it alone. Yeah. We were ready. We've been, like I told you, September 9th, we started working on our briefing, we started working on our filing, we started working on our legal strategy, and we've been ready to do this. I promised you I would. I'm pleased to have the cooperation of the Department of Labor, of the governor, for sure, of the other states that we're partnering with on the other suits. But either way, cooperation or not, we're ready. We're ready to file. We're ready to file these other ones, and we're ready to defend the liberty of the people of Indiana. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.